All right, we'll go ahead and get started. We've got a couple of folks that are on their way. As you know, we had a House Judiciary Committee hearing across the street just a little while ago that wrapped up, and some of the folks that are joining us were over there testifying. Here joined by some of my colleagues, Representative Kaur, Representative Santora, Representative Camp, Representative Rowe, and others who will introduce just momentarily. But we're here to announce the support of several national gun violence prevention groups and statewide law enforcement groups' support for House Bill 2227, my bill to enact extreme risk protective orders or red flags laws in Pennsylvania. And the colleagues behind me are co-sponsors of this initiative. My legislation will create extreme risk protection orders in Pennsylvania, allowing law enforcement and family members to petition a court to temporarily remove guns from those who evidence shows are a danger to themselves or others while protecting their constitutional rights. Respondents would receive a full hearing where they may cross-examine witnesses, present evidence, present their own witnesses, and be represented by counsel. My legislation also provides penalties for anyone lying to obtain an extreme risk protection order. 2/3 of all firearms deaths are suicides, and a Duke University study of Connecticut's red flags law found that it saved more than 70 lives. Extreme risk protection orders have been in place in 5 states for years, and 3 more have adopted them earlier this year. More than 30 other states are considering them as well. Sadly, each of these bills were adopted following tragic gun death incidents. From one end of the country to the other and across the political spectrum, state legislatures are recognizing we need to do more to identify people who are too dangerous at that time in their lives to possess a firearm. It's time for Pennsylvania to act too. I'm not alone in my fight to make this a law. Today I'm joined by representatives from the most important national organizations and statewide organizations committed to reforming our gun laws to reduce gun violence, including the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, Ceasefire PA, Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, and the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police, as well as the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. First, I'd like to introduce David Chipman, Senior Policy Advisor at Giffords Courage to Fight Gun Violence, which was founded after the shooting of U.S. Rep. Gabby Giffords and is committed to stemming the national gun death epidemic. David?
Thank you.
Sure.
I'm proud to come to Pennsylvania today and speak on behalf of Gabby and Mark, who you are well aware are very committed to the problem of gun violence. My previous experience, I served as a special agent with ATF for 25 years. And in that capacity, my understanding of the laws were that they were very good holding people accountable after something bad had already happened, and that there were huge gaps in the laws that would help police prevent violence from occurring in the first place. And that's why we at Giffords and me personally really support extreme risk protection orders, because the extreme nature of the risk is known. It's a way for police and communities and the court system to come together and buy us time by removing the gun temporarily while we figure out what the problem is and keeping our communities safe. And it's these types of preventative actions that I think we need to talk to more about as Americans, as opposed to after something horrible has happened, try to figure out who we hold accountable. So extreme risk protection orders are good. They're working in other places. And as a law enforcement professional, this is just the type of tool that I needed when I could see something bad about to happen but didn't have the authority to prevent it. So we support this bill, and thank you for letting me offer remarks today.
Thank you, David. Next, I'd like to introduce Shira Goodman from Ceasefire, Pennsylvania. Ceasefire PA is a statewide organization that works with our mayors, police chiefs, community organizations, and our churches in standing against gun violence through outreach, education, coalition building, and advocacy. Shira?
Thank you. Thank you, Rep. Stephens. You know, I've been in this room a lot. I hope that those of you watching realize that this is an unusual press conference, that we're talking about a bill that will save lives, that deals with taking guns away temporarily, and it is sponsored by a Republican, and several Republican co-sponsors are standing here with national and state groups. It shows that this should and can be a bipartisan issue. It is about saving lives, and it is about getting something done. The great thing about this bill is that it works. The data from other states, including Connecticut, which has had a bill like this in place since 1999, is that it saves lives. It prevents suicides. It probably prevents homicides. It gets people into treatment, and it is temporary. It uses a civil process to temporarily take somebody off, take away somebody's guns or put them on a no-buy list. But they can get those gun rights back when they get the treatment they need. Currently, that doesn't exist. Our gun laws are over and under inclusive. We take gun rights away from people who have had something so serious in their mental health history that they've been involuntarily committed or have been declared incompetent. That's a very high bar. And those people don't get their gun rights back, which is something some of us have been working on for a while. But on the other hand, the person who's in sudden crisis, who something has gone wrong in their life, but they've never gotten to that level of treatment or concern by those around them, has easy access to firearms with deadly consequences. We see it time and time again, and that's why these are called red flag bills. And this legislation deals with it. It gives family members and law enforcement a tool and a process that's based on a long-standing history of how we use temporary restraining orders in the domestic violence context, with a judge, with due process protections built in, that will help protect people from themselves and protect us from people who are intent to do harm. So I'm urging the folks standing here to get more of their colleagues to sign on. There was a hearing where this was discussed extensively today, and good evidence was presented to the House Judiciary Committee. I'm hoping they will move it out quickly to the House floor so that we can pass this law. We have been more fortunate in Pennsylvania that we have not, for many years, been the site of one of the instances that is grabbing the nation's headlines. But that is a matter of luck. We have a lot of guns, we have a lot of people, we have people in crisis. We could take a step that would save lives in Pennsylvania and elsewhere, and we can be a leader. But we're not alone. As Todd Stephens said, 30 states are considering this. This is a good, solid bill. We're proud to stand with him, and I'm urging the Judiciary Committee to vote this out as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shira. Next, I'd like to introduce Mary Beth Christensen, if that's okay. Pennsylvania State Legislative Lead for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, which was created to demand action from legislators, both state and federal, companies, and educational institutions to establish common sense gun reforms. Mary Beth?
Thank you, Representative Stephens, and welcome. Moms Demand was here today with these other stakeholders in keeping Pennsylvania safe for testimony before the House Judiciary Committee. We spoke in favor of two bills, a domestic violence prevention bill, which quickly disarms domestic abusers and safely secures their weapons, as well as the extreme risk protection order, HB 2227, introduced by Representative Stephens. The shorthand for the extreme risk protection order bill is the red flag bill. They call it a red flag bill for a reason. Far too often we've seen, and we've seen more and more of this recently, mass shootings and other, horrific gun incidents are committed by folks who have sent up red flags. They're having a personal crisis, they're having a mental health issue, they're just angry. These red flag bills allow the potential shooter to be temporarily separated from their guns. It gives them and their families and their loved ones some time to put between their emotion and God forbid, any incident. It gives the court an ability to step in and temporarily separate the abuser or the shooter, potential shooter, from his weapons. And it does so while preserving all due process rights. So Moms is proud to stand here with Todd Stephens, and we ask the Judiciary Committee to swiftly move to pass HB 2227. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. I do also want to note, I know we've been joined by Sarah Higginbotham, the Regional Director for this area for Everytown for Gun Safety. Thank you so much for being here, Sarah, and thanks for your testimony this morning before the Judiciary Committee. Next, I'd like to introduce Tom Gross of the Pennsylvania Chiefs of Police Association.
Thank you, Representative. I stand here representing the police chiefs of Pennsylvania in support of this bill. we are happy to participate in a discussion about new tools that we can have for police officers. One of the things that we bring to this discussion is that we're not only the first responders, but we bear witness to these tragedies: suicide, school violence, domestic violence, and those are incidents where our officers quite often respond after the fact. When we see the opportunity to have a tool that will allow us to possibly prevent some horrible tragedy, this is something that we can always support. So our interest is to enhance and expand the tools that police officers have and their ability to do policing in a constitutional way while really preventing some horrific incident in many different ways. So we're happy to be here and happy to have the representatives propose this legislation. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. You know, I think it's noteworthy that in the state of Indiana, they adopted a version of extreme risk protection orders. It's called Jake Laird's Law in Indiana, and that's because Officer Jake Laird was killed by a gunman who had been he was known to have some issues, and the police had previously committed him and disarmed him, but they ultimately had to return his guns to him. And on one night, he went on a shooting rampage, killing his own mother before going into the streets of Indianapolis and shooting up the town. And Jake Laird was a responding officer who ultimately was killed by this gunman, as I said, who the police had previously disarmed. So Indiana then adopted a version of these extreme risk protection orders for that reason. I also would like to recognize and introduce Fran Chardo, a good friend, and he's here on behalf of the Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association. He is the district attorney here in Dauphin County.
The Pennsylvania District Attorneys Association is proud to stand behind this very, very smart piece of legislation, and I'm indebted to Representative Stephens and the other sponsors of this bill for the thought they put behind this piece of legislation. It was carefully crafted to ensure public safety and to protect the rights of all citizens. This is smart legislation. One of the things that impressed me is that it protects individuals, it protects the public safety, and it does so in a swift manner. We have so many people that could be affected by a person who is suicidal or homicidal, and the wheels of justice move too slowly. This gets the people into court very, very quickly and protects their rights between 3 and 10 days. And it allows them to have a full and fair opportunity to defend their rights. And if someone misuses the process, it provides for them to be punished for misusing the process. This is smart legislation, and we believe that this will save lives. And there are too many people that are falling in the cracks because we don't have this legislation to protect people, and we're indebted to all the sponsors for finding a solution to this problem. So thank you, Representative Stephens.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, Fran. Now I just want to invite any of my colleagues that want to make remarks. Representative Kaur.
Thank you, Representative Stephens. I'm Michael Kaur of Montgomery County, and I'm delighted to serve as a co-sponsor on this bill. With what's happening that's so prevalent in today's society and the headlines, this bill is certainly timely, and arguably it is well past time for this piece of legislation. The reasons I support it is because it strikes the right balance between the need to protect the rights of an individual to own guns and the need for society to live safely. And so I'm proud to be a co-sponsor, and I commend Representative Stephens for its introduction. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Kaur. Representative Santora.
Thank you. Representative Jamie Santora from Delaware County. And I, too, want to commend and thank Representative Stephens for his leadership on this bill. This is one of the most important bills that we can pass when it comes to sensible gun policy. I have a bill that I am the sponsor of, 1400. It's a proactive bill. It's for future purchases, background checks for future purchases of guns. this bill looks at people who already own the guns. And if they do make a change in their life, they do have a mental health issue, they put it out there, it does give the opportunity to prevent tragedies from happening. Long ago, before these tragedies were more prevalent, back in the 80s in Delaware County, Sylvia Segrist brought a gun into the mall in Springfield and shot multiple people the day before Halloween. It's been out there for a long time. She didn't have the opportunity back then where she would post it on social media. The signs may not have been there. Now the signs are there. These young fellows that have just done these school shootings recently put it out there for people to see. And I don't know if it was a cry for help or a badge of honor, but this law, if it happens in the future and this law is passed, it can prevent more tragedies from happening. So again, I am proud to be a co-sponsor and thank Todd Stephens for his leadership.
Thank you, Representative Santora. Representative Camp?
Thanks, Todd. I'm Warren Camp, state rep from Chester County, and Todd, great job on the drafting of the bill and having this large coalition of different groups supporting it, from law enforcement to Moms Demand Action and Ceasefire and the others. That's tremendous. That's the way you move important legislation, and you're doing great work. I'm thrilled that the Judiciary Committee has had a series of hearings on this legislation. That's very exciting for anyone who supports these kinds of measures like I do and my colleagues do. And it's the promise of good things to come. I'd also like to say, Todd may have the same experience I do, but down in my community in Chester County and Montgomery County, when you talk about legislation like this, everybody supports it. They're reading the newspapers, they're worried about their children and their schools, and we see too often an individual who, has, as Mary Beth said, put up a bunch of red flags, and there aren't sufficient tools, obviously, or the tools have too many loopholes in them to do what's right under those circumstances, and you're left to scratch your head and have to clean up after terrible tragedies. So this kind of legislation is an opportunity with some forethought in a particular situation to separate that troubled person from the engines of killing and murder, and that's excellent, and we need to get it done right away. So great job, Todd.
Thank you, Representative Camp. And Representative Rowe.
Good afternoon. I'm State Representative Eric Rowe from the 158th District in Chester County. I'm a very proud co-sponsor of this bill, and I'd like to thank Representative Stephens for his leadership. As the fourth youngest member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, I hardly remember a time before school shootings, and I can tell you what, my generation does not have the patience for this any longer. My wife and I just had twins 8 weeks ago, and that makes this very real for us. In just a few short years, our sons will be walking the halls of public schools. I want them and every child in Pennsylvania to be safe at school and at home. So I'm very happy to co-sponsor this bill, and I thank Representative Stephens.
Thank you. Thanks so much to my colleagues for their support. Just to give you an indication, we have 25 co-sponsors on this bill, and they are bipartisan. We have folks from both sides of the aisle. So you heard from many of these folks. They testified, many of them, before the House Judiciary Committee this morning on why this legislation needs to become law. And look, it's time we adopt the extreme risk protection orders here in Pennsylvania so we can prevent more tragedies before they occur. And I'm thrilled to have the support of so many terrific partners. Any questions that anyone might have?
I do have one. The ACLU in a couple states has raised some concerns about this bill violating due process laws. Do you think that they are protected in this case? And what are the standards for determining whether a person, is enough of a threat to have their firearms taken away?
Sure. Look, we're still accepting feedback and comments from many stakeholders, and we'll certainly incorporate that. Ensuring that there's adequate due process is actually one of the things that really attracted me to this approach. And my bill actually has more robust due process protections than most other states even afford. And one example of that is the fact that I'll provide an attorney. If someone can't afford one, they have the right to counsel, and in this case, we'll even make sure that one is paid for them if they can't afford one themselves. So I want to make sure that we have all those due process protections in place, and we'll certainly work with any of the stakeholder groups to ensure that people's rights are protected. What was the second part of your question?
Just, what are the standards for determining if somebody is, enough of a threat to take away?
Sure. You'd have to prove through clear and convincing evidence that they are a threat to themselves or others before the judge would go ahead and order them to surrender their firearms. Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much. Absolutely.